You know that particular shade of beige that makes you question your life choices? That's exactly what I was staring at on my office wall when I heard the unmistakable sound of Italian leather shoes clicking down the hallway like a metronome of impending doom. I was methodically organizing my desk drawer, that therapeutic ritual of arranging paper clips by size when your professional existence feels more chaotic than a toddler's toy box. The coffee in my world's okayest employee mug had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. Sometimes the bitter aftertaste matches your mood perfectly. Let me paint you a picture of Slate Holdings, where I've been grinding away for 3 years as a senior analyst. Think corporate sterility meets desperate attempts at fun workplace culture, motivational posters about teamwork hanging next to a broken printer that nobody's fixed since the Clinton administration. I'd built my reputation the hard way: late nights, meticulous reports, and the kind of institutional knowledge that makes you indispensable. Or so I thought. See, I'd been working on the Maxwell Group acquisition for 8 months. 8 months. I knew every financial statement, every regulatory filing, every coffee preference of their C-suite executives. I could recite their quarterly earnings in my sleep and probably did on several occasions. The upcoming investor panel was supposed to be my moment, the chance to present our findings to potential backers who could make or break this deal. But apparently, I wasn't panel material. Enter Gregory Blake, our project director and the human embodiment of a LinkedIn influencer's fever dream. All teeth and ambition, with the kind of confidence that comes from failing upward through middle management. That morning, he materialized in my cubicle like a polyester-clad apparition. "Lily," he said, not bothering to sit down because that would require acknowledging my humanity, "we've decided to go with someone else for the investor panel." I looked up from my monitor, where I'd been perfecting the presentation I'd assumed I'd be giving. Someone else? "We want someone more charismatic. More ambitious." He delivered this with the casual cruelty of someone ordering a sandwich. "You understand." I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you're happy, the kind you give when you're mentally calculating whether corporate manslaughter is a real charge. "Of course. Who's taking over?" "Ethan Williams from marketing." Ashworth straightened his tie like he'd just solved world hunger. "Fresh perspective, Dynamic energy." Ethan Williams. The guy who'd asked me last week if EBITDA was a type of sandwich. "I'll make sure he has everything he needs," I said, still smiling. "Excellent. Team player attitude. This is why you're so reliable." Reliable. The workplace equivalent of calling someone's personality nice. Here's what Gregory Blake didn't know about me: I don't just analyze companies, I analyze people. And I'd been analyzing him for months. See, while he was busy taking credit for my work and practicing his visionary leadership speeches in the bathroom mirror, I was documenting everything. Every email, every missed deadline, every creative interpretation of expense reports. But more importantly, I'd been the one actually communicating with the Maxwell Group executives. Every call, every negotiation, every delicate conversation about deal terms had gone through me. Blake just swooped in for the glory shots and golf meetings. You want to know something hilarious? Blake didn't even know the Maxwell Group CEO's name. I'd watched him in meetings, confidently referring to Jim when talking about their leadership structure. The CEO's name is James Maxwell, and he despises being called anything but Mr. Maxwell. I'd learned this in my first phone call with him 8 months ago when I accidentally used Jim and got a 15-minute lecture about professional courtesy. But Blake? He kept calling him Jim in emails. Jim this, Jim that. I'd CC'd myself on everything, watching this slow-motion train wreck unfold while Blake remained blissfully unaware that he was systematically irritating the one person who could kill our deal with a single phone call. Then there was the time Blake told the Maxwell Group CFO that our synergistic optimization protocols would facilitate maximum value creation opportunities. I spent 20 minutes on the phone that afternoon explaining to a very confused Catherine Maxwell, the CEO's daughter and head of operations, that we were simply planning to streamline their supply chain management. "Does your project director always talk like he swallowed a business textbook?" she'd asked me. "Only on days ending in Y," I'd replied, which earned me the first genuine laugh I'd heard from the Maxwell Group team in months. See, Blake had this theory that impressive-sounding corporate speak made him seem more authoritative. What it actually did was make him sound like a malfunctioning chatbot programmed exclusively with MBA buzzwords. Meanwhile, I was building actual relationships with the people who mattered, speaking their language, understanding their concerns, and slowly becoming the bridge between our companies. So when I started getting calls Tuesday morning, 2 days before the panel, asking about irregularities in the financial projections, I knew exactly what had happened. Ethan, bless his marketing heart, had tried to jazz up my conservative numbers with some creative forecasting. You know, the kind that makes regulators very, very interested in your company. But here's where it gets really good. Ethan hadn't just changed the numbers, he presented them using Blake's signature corporate speak. So instead of saying projected revenue increase of 12%, Ethan's presentation talked about exponentially leveraging growth vectors for optimized profit maximization strategies. Catherine Maxwell called me directly Tuesday afternoon. "Lily," she said, and I could hear the barely controlled laughter in her voice, "we just received the most fascinating presentation from someone named Ethan Williams. Did you know your company has discovered a way to revolutionize synergistic paradigms through disruptive innovation methodologies?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. What exactly did he promise you? Well, according to his slides, we're apparently going to achieve a 47% increase in operational efficiency while simultaneously reducing costs by 35% and increasing revenue by 60%. Also, something about harnessing the power of collaborative ecosystems to maximize stakeholder value optimization. Mathematics, as it turns out, doesn't care about your corporate buzzwords. When you promise impossible numbers using meaningless phrases, people tend to notice. Especially people who've spent decades building successful businesses and can spot BS from 3 time zones away. Wednesday brought more calls. Maxwell Group's board of directors wanted clarification. Their lawyers started asking pointed questions about our financial modeling methodologies. Their compliance team requested documentation for every projection in Ethan's presentation. Thursday brought the really fun stuff. Our own legal department started getting involved. Apparently, when you present wildly inaccurate financial projections to potential acquisition partners, it raises questions about due diligence, fiduciary responsibility, and something called material misrepresentation. I spent Thursday afternoon in a conference room with our chief legal counsel, Michael Torres, who kept asking me increasingly uncomfortable questions about the presentation process. "So you're telling me," Torres said, reviewing the documents spread across the mahogany table, "that Williams created this presentation without consulting the original financial models?" "That's correct." "And Blake approved it without reviewing your analysis?" "Also correct." "And neither of them bothered to run these numbers past anyone who actually worked on the Maxwell Group file?" I gestured to the stack of emails I'd printed. "I have documentation showing I requested multiple meetings to brief Ethan on the technical details. Blake canceled 3 of them personally, saying Ethan was smart enough to figure it out himself." Torres rubbed his temples like he was developing a migraine in real time. "This is a compliance nightmare." By Friday morning, I was sitting in my cubicle, sipping fresh coffee from my mug, when I heard those familiar Italian leather shoes. But this time, they weren't clicking with competence, they were practically sprinting. Actually, let me paint you the full picture of that Friday morning, because it was absolutely beautiful. I got to the office early, around 7 a.m., partly because I knew the chaos was coming, and partly because I wanted a front row seat to the corporate equivalent of a demolition derby. The first sign that things were going sideways was when I saw Blake's car in the parking lot at 6:30 a.m. Blake never arrived before 9 a.m. on a good day. This was not shaping up to be a good day. The second sign was the stream of people heading to the executive conference room: Torres from legal, Amanda Foster from compliance, Robert Kim from accounting, and, most ominously, Sylvia Chen from HR. When HR shows up to a meeting at 7 a.m., someone's about to have a very bad day. I settled in at my desk with my coffee and the morning news, listening to the muffled sounds of heated conversation drifting from the conference room. Every few minutes, someone would storm out, make urgent phone calls, and storm back in. It was like watching a corporate soap opera unfold in real time. Wednesday brought more calls. Thursday brought lawyers. By Friday morning, I was sitting in my cubicle, sipping fresh coffee from my mug, when I heard those familiar Italian leather shoes. But this time, they weren't clicking with competence, they were practically sprinting. Actually, let me paint you the full picture of that Friday morning, because it was absolutely beautiful. I got to the office early, around 7 a.m., partly because I knew the chaos was coming, and partly because I wanted a front row seat to the corporate equivalent of a demolition derby. Around 8:30 a.m., Ethan Williams walked in looking like he'd spent the night in a washing machine. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had that distinct look of someone who'd been stress-eating nothing but gas station coffee and existential dread for breakfast. He shuffled to his desk, which happened to be visible from my cubicle, and immediately started frantically clicking through emails. Every few seconds, his face would scrunch up like he was trying to solve advanced calculus using only interpretive dance. It was actually kind of entertaining to watch someone slowly realize their career was circling the drain. Around 9 a.m., Blake made his grand entrance. Remember how I said he looked confident? Well, confidence had officially left the building. He looked like someone who'd just discovered his parachute was actually a decorative tablecloth. He beelined straight to Ethan's desk, and even from 20 feet away, I could hear the barely controlled panic in his voice. "Did you get the email from Maxwell Group?" Blake whispered, but you know how corporate whispers work, everyone within a 15-foot radius could hear every word. "Which one?" Ethan replied, his voice cracking like a teenager asking someone to prom. "The one from their CFO, their legal team, or their board of directors?" Blake's face went through several interesting color changes. "There are multiple emails?" 17, Ethan said, and I swear I could hear his career flatline from across the office. "They're asking for explanations, documentation, clarifications, and something called an immediate rectification of material misstatements." That's when Blake looked around the office and spotted me. Our eyes met across the sea of cubicles, and for a moment, I saw something beautiful, the exact moment when someone realizes they've been outsmarted by the person they underestimated. He walked over to my desk with all the enthusiasm of someone heading to their own execution. "Lily." Blake's voice cracked like a 13-year-old's. "Why are they demanding a refund?" I took a leisurely sip of coffee and looked up with genuine curiosity. "Who's demanding a refund?" "The investors. Maxwell Group is threatening to pull out. The compliance team is asking questions about our projections." He was sweating through his shirt now, and honestly, it was not a good look. "Oh, that." I turned back to my computer. Well, when you change the financial forecasts without understanding the underlying assumptions, sometimes the numbers stop making sense. It's like changing the recipe for a cake but only switching the flour. Everything falls apart. His face went through several interesting color changes. "You knew this would happen?" "Gregory," I said, using my most patient voice, the one usually reserved for explaining the internet to my grandmother, "I told you Ethan would need extensive briefing on the technical details. You said he could figure it out. Turns out, he couldn't." Blake started pacing in front of my desk like a caged animal. "Can you fix this?" "Fix what, exactly?" "The mess. The projections. Make it go away." I leaned back in my chair and studied him for a moment. "Gregory, do you remember what you said to me on Monday?" He stopped pacing. "What?" "You said you wanted someone more charismatic and ambitious for the panel. Someone who could bring dynamic energy to the presentation." "Yes, but..." Well, Ethan certainly brought dynamic energy. Unfortunately, he also brought mathematical impossibility and legal liability. The next hour was pure theater. Blake spent 30 minutes on the phone with Maxwell Group's team, and I could hear him getting progressively more flustered as they asked increasingly technical questions he couldn't answer. "Can you hold for just one moment?" Blake said into the phone, then covered the receiver and looked at me with desperation. "They're asking about the depreciation models for their manufacturing equipment." "Page 47 of my original analysis," I said without looking up from my computer. "They want to know about the regulatory compliance costs for the facility expansion." Page 63. "Something about cross-border tax implications?" Appendix C, subsection 4. Blake hung up the phone and stared at me like I'd just performed actual magic. "You have all this memorized?" "Gregory, I spent 8 months on this project." "Of course I have it memorized." That's when Ethan appeared at my cubicle, looking like he'd aged about 5 years in the past 2 hours. "Lily, I think I messed up." "Really?" I said, not bothering to hide my amusement. "What gave you that impression?" "The part where I promised them we could increase their revenue by 60% while cutting costs by 35%. That would do it." Is that impossible?" I turned to face him fully. Ethan, if that were possible, every company in America would be doing it. We'd have solved capitalism. Blake jumped back into the conversation with all the grace of a rhinoceros attempting ballet. But you can explain it to them, right? Make it make sense? Make what makes sense? I asked. The mathematical impossibility, or the fact that you put someone in charge of a presentation who didn't understand the basic principles of the project? Before Blake could answer, our supervisor appeared. Regional Director Janet Morrison. No, wait, I can't use that name. Regional Director Helen Wu approached our little gathering with the expression of someone who'd just received some very interesting phone calls. Brooks, she said, I need to see you in conference room B immediately. Am I in trouble? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Quite the opposite, Wu replied, then looked at Blake and Ethan. You two, however, need to report to HR in 10 minutes. The walk to conference room B felt like a victory lap. Wu closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. Lily, she said, settling into the chair across from me, I've spent the morning on the phone with Maxwell Group's executive team. They have some very interesting things to say about your work on this project. All good things, I hope? James Maxwell himself called me personally at 7:30 this morning. Do you know what he said? I shook my head, though I was starting to smile. He said, and I quote, if you're smart, you'll put Lily Brooks in charge of this entire deal. She's the only person at your company who seems to understand what the hell we're actually trying to accomplish. That's when the dominoes really started falling. Wu explained that Maxwell Group had made it clear, either I took over the project immediately, or they were walking away from the deal entirely. Not just walking away, they were prepared to tell other potential acquisition targets about Slate Holdings' unprofessional presentation practices. So here's what's going to happen, Wu continued. You're getting a promotion to senior project manager, effective immediately. You'll report directly to me, and you'll have full authority over the Maxwell Group acquisition. And Blake? Blake is being reassigned to our Denver office. Something about giving him a chance to develop his leadership skills in a smaller market. And Ethan? Wu's expression turned grim. Ethan Williams will no longer be employed by Slate Holdings as of 5 p.m. today. 20 minutes later, I walked out of conference room B with a new title, a significant salary increase, and the kind of professional vindication that most people only dream about. Blake and Ethan were nowhere to be seen, though I did notice 2 cardboard boxes sitting by the security desk. The rest of the day was a masterclass in corporate justice. Word traveled fast through the office, it always does when someone gets fired. By lunch, everyone knew that the charismatic and ambitious presentation had backfired spectacularly, and that the reliable analyst had just become the company's newest rising star. I spent the afternoon fielding congratulatory messages from colleagues and setting up meetings with the Maxwell Group team for the following week. Catherine Maxwell sent me a personal email that simply said, looking forward to working with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. At 4:30 p.m., I watched through my window as Blake loaded his cardboard box into his BMW. He looked up at the building one last time, and for just a moment, I felt a tiny pang of sympathy. Then I remembered his smug face when he told me I wasn't charismatic enough, and the feeling passed. Ethan left through the back exit, probably trying to avoid the walk of shame through the main office. I never saw him again, though I heard through the corporate grapevine that he ended up at a small marketing firm in Toledo. I hope he learned to check his math. The investor panel went off without a hitch the following week. Funny how much more charismatic you become when you're the only person who can answer the technical questions. Wu introduced me as the new senior project manager, and I delivered the presentation I'd been preparing for months, with the correct numbers this time. Maxwell Group signed the deal 3 weeks later. The acquisition was valued at $847 million, making it the largest deal in Slate Holdings history. I got a bonus that was larger than my previous annual salary, and my name went on the company's Wall of Excellence in the lobby. As for Blake, well, let's just say his visionary leadership is now being applied to managing a team of 3 people in our Denver satellite office. I heard through the grapevine that he's struggling with the altitude adjustment. Both literally and figuratively. The really delicious irony? 2 months after the Maxwell acquisition closed, I received a LinkedIn message from Ethan Williams. He'd found a job at a small marketing firm and wanted to reconnect professionally. His message included this gem: I've learned so much about the importance of accuracy in financial communications. I'd love to collaborate again sometime. I screenshot that message and printed it out. It's hanging on my office wall now. Yes, I have an office now, with a door and everything, right next to my world's okayest employee mug, which I kept as a reminder of how far I've come. But here's the really satisfying part. 6 months later, Maxwell Group's CEO personally recommended me for the Young Professional Excellence Award from our industry association. At the ceremony, James Maxwell introduced me by saying, "Lily Brooks is exactly the kind of analytical mind our industry needs, someone who combines technical expertise with genuine integrity." The award came with a $10,000 prize and a profile in the industry magazine. Blake's LinkedIn shows he liked the article. I'm sure that didn't sting at all. I still have that world's okayest employee mug on my desk. But lately, I've been thinking about upgrading to something that says world's most indispensable employee. Though knowing corporate America, they'd probably find that too ambitious. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's being so good at your job that your incompetent boss accidentally proves your point for you. And if you're wondering whether I learned anything from this experience, well, I learned that reliability isn't such a bad thing after all. Especially when everyone else is busy being charismatic. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some very important paper clips to organize. You never know when you might need them.